On episode 6 of the Welcome Back podcast, I speak with Deano Graham, owner of Love Light Consulting, a health and wellness service located right here in Northeast PA. When I saw Deano's application come through for the submission into the podcast guest list, something told me to try to book him and have this conversation with him. You will see that by the end of our discussion, it became very clear to me on why I was compelled to meet with him and speak with him for the very first time right here on the podcast. And it is my hope that somebody, at least one person out there, watches this and gets some value out of it and learns how to deal with trauma that they've been carrying around most of the time without ever knowing it, and having the ability to finally connect with their inner energy. I think you're going to really enjoy this. Deano was a great guest on the show, and he's somebody who I'm going to stay connected with, hopefully forever. Enjoy. All right, welcome back to the show. This is the Welcome Back podcast, and today I have a special guest with me, Deano Graham. Why don't you tell the people who you are and what you're all about?
Hey everybody, first of all, thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me. Hey everybody out there. As Mike said, my name is Deano. I am the owner and founder of Love Light Consulting. We'll get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of what I do, but the short version of what I do is add value by helping people regulate and understand their emotions. Because it's a crazy world out there. A lot of people are hurting. There are a lot of emotional pains that have gone unhealed. And my process is to help people bridge those emotional gaps and solve those practical problems in their lives so that they can enjoy the lives that they live, so they can feel productive.
Super important. How did you find yourself getting into this line of work?
I'll give you the short version. The short version is, ever since I've been a young man, my mom always says, "Hey Deano, you should be a lawyer because you can talk yourself into trouble or out of trouble." Now, I'm Jamaican, so, top jobs in Jamaica is lawyer or doctor. I didn't want to do the schooling to be a doctor, so I'm like, fine, let me do law. I was on track to do that in Jamaica, but I ran into a coursework. My father, he is a farmer, and that's how we survived, to be honest with you. And what ultimately happened was there was a particular case that I had to review and whatnot, and the law practice, it disenfranchised an entire farming community. Now again, that farming community is near and dear to me because this is how my family provided for us. And then all of a sudden, from a place in Jamaica, I said that I want to do therapy. My mom talked me out of it because back then, and maybe even now, mental health is not a thing that is quite understood or even respected in Jamaica. So she had legitimate concerns. She's like, please don't do it because you won't be able to survive. Nobody's going to come to you for that. Being an arrogant 19-year-old, I'm like, Mom, I'm going to do it my way. And then my sister, she happened to be living on Main Street, and ESU has a great psychology program, so she said, hey, you can come here and see what it's like. And then did my bachelor's in psychology at ESU. Fast forward, got into the field. Then I said I need more, actual knowledge, so I went ahead for my master's in social work, and then that matriculated into actually being a therapist. And the reason that I created Love Light was, in the therapy space, sometimes people get very bogged down by the labels, by their diagnoses, and they limit themselves because of a diagnosis. And my philosophical belief is that we're so much more than one specific label. Mike, you're a businessman, you're a husband, and you're so much more than just these very small frames of life. Albeit important, it's still a limited space of who you are. But what happens, to be very honest, within the field is someone comes in, they get a diagnosis, and that's the track that they're limited to. With Love Light, I wanted to create a holistic approach to helping people heal, not just on the small aspect of, hey, these are the things that I'm struggling with, but what are the other aspects of you that make you you? Because ultimately, again, we want to feel whole at the end of the day. And approaching a person with the dignity of who they are as a whole is kind of what got me to this point in my life and creating Love Light.
Um, what happened to you? Let me therapize you a little bit here. What happened to you to make you want to help other people with this education that you've gotten, and clearly it's on your heart to want to help people out. What happened to you that has put you in this position where you feel like, you're super empathetic and you want to help people understand their diagnoses and who they are, and how to heal through that?
So what happened to me? What happened to me was great parents, to be honest. So my parents are fundamentally Christians. However, they approach their religion in very different aspects. So my mom, she is the Christian who she goes to church 7 days a week. I'm pretty sure she's not calling me right now because she's in some church service somewhere. My father, who I am a lot like, he still follows the principle of Christianity. However, he doesn't like the constraints of the church. And one of his things was the church doesn't really give back to the people. So in Jamaica, they would have these big concerts, what they essentially call crusades, which ultimately is a fundraising mechanism. And we get it, the church needs money. But at the same time, if a church member who is the same one who is contributing to that fundraiser needs support in burying their loved one or whatever the case might be, the church isn't going to help them. So what he does is whatever money he has, he will take it and he will go out and literally buy school books and food and literally just take it to these people. And being a child, I had to go with him. I had to be able to very quickly adapt to a whole bunch of different scenarios. I had to, in essence, be his wingman. So if he's occupied with one person, I had to keep the other person basically chill. Then on top of that, a very interesting part of my life dynamic is my relationship with my siblings. So it's 5 of us in total, all same parents, but I'm the baby of the family. And also, the closest sibling in age to me is 10 years older than I am. And what that means is I had to spend a lot of time by myself learning how to regulate my own self, because I didn't have my siblings to be there to advocate for me or to help me figure out certain things. And I also had to adapt very quickly to them and their needs, because when I'm 6, the closest one in age to me is 16. Mm-hmm. So for me to relate to him, I had to very quickly understand that, hey, you know what? I can't necessarily just approach him with the 6-year-old mind frame. I have to somehow meet him at his level, and then that will give me the opportunity for us to connect on something and take it from there. So honestly, that is where it started. I'm definitely my father with the empathy, but then my siblings and just how our family dynamic was, I had to be able to adapt very quickly to situations that I'm honestly new and unfamiliar with.
The ability as a young kid to, first of all, recognize that, hey, there's there's a big enough gap here between me and my next oldest sibling, and in order for them to listen to me, frankly, I have to put myself kind of in a closer to them position, right? I'm 6 years old. In the example you used, they're 16. I have to make myself like at least 10, 12 years old to, yes, get them to like meet me at least halfway, almost halfway. That sounds like a rare thing. I don't know a lot of young kids who are able to reflect that much, to have awareness, have that much awareness. Is that something that you attribute to just your uniqueness, or something that you got from your family unit?
I think a little bit of both. Definitely a part of it is my uniqueness because I have a few years ago when I went to Jamaica, I sat down with one of the family friends who used to, take care of me while my mom and my father were working, and she said something very interesting. Even now, my wife is amazed and fascinated by how even keeled I am about many things. And the lady was, she's saying that, hey, Dino as a baby, he you wouldn't know if he was hungry or if he needed to be changed. Like even from a baby, I just was not necessarily fussy. If I started fussing, then it was probably really an issue. So again, I don't even remember that she was sharing that with us before she passed. And then there's the aspect of I'm a lot like my father. Yeah, just intuitively, just the way that we think about life, just the way that we approach the world. And also with me growing up essentially by myself, or essentially as a single child, one of the things I've had to do was I've had to be a very astute observer. So I had to observe a lot. I had to observe my relationship with people and things. Back then, in Jamaica, you only had two TV stations. So I had to also become very creative and adapt multiple perspectives. So I think just because of the environment of which I was in, I had to adapt. So I think it's a combination of all those, if I'm being very honest with you. That's a very good question. I never thought of that before.
The culture in Jamaica. How old are you?
I am. Ooh, now you gotta guess, Mike. I'm gonna tell you, but
Okay.
I like having people guess.
You're 36.
36. Ah, man, Mike, you're aging me. Ah, man. I'm
Is
gonna have to
that,
tell my wife I need some more moisture
you
on
need
my
some
face.
moisture? I'm sorry.
uh, I am 34.
34. All right, I was close enough. All right. I'm trying to
Yes.
place you growing up in like what time period. But
Hmm.
the culture in Jamaica, the is it a culture where the husband and the wife, the mother and the father typically are in the house, right? Like the family unit, it's a nuclear family unit where the parents are together, or is there a lot of, especially when you were growing up there, a lot of broken homes and families where the mother and the father aren't in the house together?
So ideally, it's a nuclear family. And it's interest. That question is a very interesting questions. You ask really good questions, Mike.
Thank you.
Um,
We're gonna
I've been blessed.
clip that, and we'll put that out first. Perfect. Thank you.
um, so I've been blessed to be in the nuclear family, and that's a lot of what I saw growing up. However, as I matured, I started to understand all the nuances of the I guess brokenness of families.
Hmm.
So going to a family member's home, most of the my immediate family, yes, they were nuclear, but within those, there was, let's say, a step parent involved, but they treated everybody as one family.
Hmm.
Walking in, I just saw everybody as one family, and we just embraced it as such. There are also situations where people are living under the same roof. I thought they were family. Shoot, I thought that they were my family, and they have no relation at all. So,
They just needed
so
somewhere
I figured,
to lay down. Perfect.
yeah. So I figured all that out as I got older. But growing up, my view on life, to answer your question, was that it was predominantly a nuclear family, and that was the ideal. And again, coming from the Christianity
Hmm.
perspective on life, that's the
Of
ideal.
course. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now in Jamaica, is it similar, do you think? Or is it more broken homes? I guess like what I'm trying to really figure out is I come from a broken home. My parents were divorced when I was 8 years old. I, at that time, was the youngest of three siblings. When my mom got remarried, she had gave me two more siblings, 10 and 11 years younger than me. So that age gap where you were with your next oldest sibling is right there in that same area. And, you know, I'm kind of messed. I know I got a lot of things I got to deal with. And I don't want to attribute that all to being in a broken home and a broken family dynamic with abuse and all sorts of stuff going on. But I'm just trying to get like a perspective of like who you are and how you
Hmm.
became this very empathetic, even like tempered person, seemingly in a house with five siblings, five other siblings, or you were one of five?
I'm one of five.
One of
I'm the
five.
last of
So
five.
a lot
Yeah.
going on in the house.
Hmm.
You know, I didn't grow up in Jamaica,
So,
so I don't know what it's like growing up in Jamaica, but
I always tell my mom this, and she used to feel bad. And I'm like, Mom, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I used to tell her, I'm like, Hey, Mom, I have attachment issues. Leave me alone. I got attachment issues. And then ever so often, don't get me started talking about numbers, Mike. I tell everybody, I'm like, I'm self-diagnosed dyslexic. Um, but I guess I'll say very specific to my family dynamic. So, getting back to your original question before I go off on a bit of a tangent here. Um, Now it's a lot more open. Growing up, I think I only knew of one family that was divorced. So even if people were having a hard time, they tended to try to make it work. And even if something was going on, it was suppressed a lot. Now, being an adult and understanding the world, again, asking certain questions, I'm understanding everything that was going on. But from a child perspective growing up, yeah, I saw many, if not all, families together. I think it was maybe when I was maybe 10 was the first. I had a family friend who used to come over quite a bit. His parents were getting a divorce. That's literally the first time I knew that a marriage literally could dissolve. I was aware of situations where people died or people moved away, or probably, I guess maybe a more common situation was someone got someone pregnant out of wedlock, and no direct relation there, and that was relatively normal.
Mhm.
But from a child perspective, yeah, my worldview was that people were together, then they were married. Some people got married because they started having kids, but by and large, the ultimate trend was people to get married. And now that I think about it, even now in my core community, it's still the only one couple that I know actually went through an actual divorce, if that makes
Wow.
sense.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. It's just the complete opposite of what I experienced growing up. It seemed
Hmm.
like there were very few uh, family units that were intact where I was growing up. I grew up in the 80s, 90s in New York, so Brooklyn
Hmm.
and Staten Island. And I don't know if it was just the time or it just happened to be just coincidence that everybody seemed to have divorced parents and step parents involved, and step siblings involved sometimes. And I always wonder what kind of effect that had on me and my siblings growing up in that dynamic, right? My father is an alcoholic, which is why my parents got divorced when I was 8 years old. He's since been sober like 35 years or something like that. He got sober because of that.
Hmm.
Marriage just wasn't going to work out. It had already run its course, and then it was like kind of too little, too late. But I do often wonder what kind of effect that has had on me as a man growing up. I'm 41, and now being a father of an 11-year-old who's an only child, and trying to figure out how to place the experiences I went through, what those things may have done to me, whether I'm aware of them or not, how to help categorize those things and heal through them so that way I could
Hmm.
be a better version of the best things in my upbringing for my son, if that makes any sense. So I'm like constantly trying to figure this dynamic out.
Yes, no, and that makes absolute sense because as a father, a part of your intention and your role is how do I heal myself so that I create a better environment, a better future for my child slash children, if that's in your intentions or future. And that makes a whole bunch of sense. And one of the things I say to people, even over the weekend, I was at a panel, and I said to this person who asked me a question because I was on the panel about, so with my current work, I don't work with children directly for Love Light. However, when I meet parents and they're saying, "Hey, can I have my child come work with you?" One of the things I tend to say to parents is the more ideal situation is to work with the parent, because a child is going to always respond to their environment. In one way or another, they're always going to respond to their environment. And you as a parent, you can probably attest to this. You can tell your child, and even for any parents listening to this, you can tell your child whatever you want to tell them till you're blue in the face. They're going to hear you, and some of them might actually listen. When they're teenagers, you have maybe 15 seconds before they shut you down. But, younger and maybe a little bit older, they might, actually listen to you. But what they're going to pay very close attention to is what you do after that.
Let's do a
More
little
is
role
always
playing.
caught than taught.
Let's do a little role playing so I can learn something here. Okay.
Okay.
This is a typical scenario that I know a lot of parents deal with, because I deal with it every freaking day. There's this constant struggle between screen time, right? Giving too much screen time to my kid, knowing that it could potentially be having a very negative impact, especially on his ability to focus, right? Because it's a lot of short bursts of screen time during the screen time, right? So like anything on YouTube or anything like that becomes like a rapid fire of dopamine hits, right? And then I enter the room, like you said, and I say, hey, name the thing. Could be, what do you want for dinner? Could be, what'd you learn in school today? Could be whatever. It doesn't matter. I want to give you $1 billion. Can't get him to pay attention, right? Because he's locked in. So what you're saying is, regardless of the response you get from the kid, what follows next is really important for the learning process.
Yes.
For the kid, right? So if you follow that up with, getting elevated in energy and raising your voice and saying, how come you never listen, and this and that, or that. What if we could, can we walk through like what some of those situations look like, and the effect that could have on the parent-child relationship?
Absolutely. And you give me a ballpark as to how old your child is.
He's 11.
Exact age.
I'll give you the
11.
exact ballpark. 11. Yeah.
Alrighty. So at different ages, your sense of control is going to be different, just because the child is moving through different developmental stages. So at 11, so prepubescent and kids in puberty, their job is literally to find their independence. That's what they're seeking for. And that is going to include them trying to find their own voice, find their own interest, and more right now is going to be a lot about what his or her peers are doing. So it's going to be the trend. And that's very important for the child, because when you die, they have to live with the people who are plus or minus 5 years their age. So it's very important that they keep up with the pattern of what's going on in life, because if not, they'll be ostracized either by themselves or by their peers. So that's one thing that I try to remind parents about, that it is important that they have some degree of access to what's going on. And if your teenager is giving you a bit of a pushback, sometimes don't take it personally, because they're literally doing their developmental job. Your job at that point in time, I'm sorry as a parent to say, sometimes you just gotta let them fall, because they will learn through pain. Now, getting back to a specific situation, the first thing that I would work with a parent on is, first of all, regulating yourself. Because a lot of times when parents walk in, you walk in probably already on 10, or already with an assumption as to what their response might be. So a number of things that it might be helpful for a parent is, on a regular day when they aren't on the devices, say, hey, we got to create a schedule here, bud. I don't want you on, fine, you have to be on YouTube, you like being on TikTok, whatever it might be, but we also have to strike a balance here. So create a quasi bit of a schedule, because children honestly don't mind when you hold them accountable. But what happens is parents tend to be at times inconsistent. And it makes sense. You guys are busy, you're tired, you just don't have time for the BS. But when you can hold a child accountable, when I bring up a schedule, and it doesn't have to be like a rigid thing. I'm not saying parents need to now do another thing that they have to do. It's just hey, at 7 o'clock, what are you supposed to be doing? Oh, I'm supposed to be doing my homework. So there's no surprise if you walk in and say, hey, I need you off of the tablet because it's 7 o'clock. It's now part of the flow of the family. So it doesn't have to now be like a whole, regimented thing. It's a simple, hey, at 7 o'clock, this is your cutoff point for this particular thing. Mm-hmm. And then connect with the child on why this is important. They don't have to agree. This is important because whatever the case might be. I think you need to have a wider perspective on life. I think you have to be able to regulate yourself a lot better. So the first step I would suggest to parents is pick one thing. So pick a time that you would like your child off of the screen or whatever the device might be. Pick a time, communicate that with the child, and communicate why that is important. Mm-hmm. Then now the next aspect is regulate yourself. So when you walk in, you aren't meeting the child at 10 because the child is gonna do one of two things. They're either gonna cower down because now they're afraid of you, or they're eventually gonna just get tired and try to buck up, and that's always a confrontational situation. So creating that environment where both people are respected, where you as a parent, hey, as your parent, this is important to me, and I need and to a certain degree demand this respect from you. So when I say get off the darn screen, you get off the darn screen. But you also hold your child sense of dignity and independence with respect. Hey, this is important to you. Take a break.
When the parent reacts to whatever the case is with, let's just say, aggression or anger, mm-hmm. what kind of effects could that have on a kid, around the age as my kid? What does that teach? What does that teach my kid if that's how I react?
Well, so here's the thing, kids are always going to remember if you react with anger. So then if they, in an unrelated situation, now start spazzing out and being angry, they're going to look at you as a hypocrite. So whatever it is that you have to say, they aren't going to hold it with any validity or respect towards what you're saying. So why should they care what you got to say? And that's going to probably come around maybe around 16, where now he's physically, more mature. He might realize that, hey, that is only getting older. He's hitting his peak. He might be having interest by his friends or girls or whatever is going on. So the thing that I would say about anger is that at the time sets the seed for you to not be able to reinforce what you want them to do, because at some point in time they're going to respond in anger. Maybe not to you, but maybe to their peer, maybe to another teacher. And it's going to be very tough for you to approach them in a authentic way, because they're going to be like, well, you're angry. You always approach me angrily. So, for example, getting back to your situation, now that he's 11, now is the ideal time to have an open discussion. Hey, what is it that you like on TikTok or whatever his favorite thing is? And they'll tell you. Show a little bit of interest. I know as adults it doesn't make sense. Some of it don't make sense to me. Show a little bit of interest, because now they also have buy-in to. They feel like you are trying to connect with them. Mm-hmm. Oh, that actually cares about this TikTok trend. And you don't have to know everything. You just show that certain degree of interest. So again, by the time that you step in, you aren't seen as the enemy. Oh, that has a point that he's trying to make.
Yeah. Is there a negative impact if you joke around too much with your kid?
It depends. Yes and no. In what context?
So, so in a similar scenario, instead of coming in hot, I told you to turn this thing off and you never listen, whatever. Instead of bringing it there, you bring it to a sarcastic, playful, joking around thing. Is it negative, or if there is a negative impact, could it be that, you know, the kid doesn't know when you're being serious and when you're playing around? There's no defined boundaries on, what is acceptable and when, because you're just being confusing, right? With the
Hmm.
messaging as the parent. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes absolute
Because
sense.
I can tell you right
So,
now, it pisses my wife off. Like, the effect it has on my wife is very clear. When I joke around too much and I'm too sarcastic, she doesn't speak that language. She speaks that language 10% of the time. The other 90%, it just pisses her off. And here I am, just think I'm being funny. So I know the effect
yo,
it has on my wife because she has very clearly stated to me, and therapists in the past have stated to me, not a great way to go about it. But for the kid, is there a negative effect that this kind of communication could have?
well, it depends on the child and depends on your relationship with the child. The child might absolutely love that. That might be the way that they want to be, communicated with. So it all depends on the child. It depends on your relationship with the child. And I won't answer this in this moment. Actually, let me get the very important point here. One of the most important things for children is consistency. So if that's your approach, that's your approach.
Okay, that makes
Because it
sense.
does. The biggest thing for children is, as you said, one day you're angry, next day you're laughing, next day you're midway. They don't know what to do. And one of the things I talk to people a lot about is creating an emotionally safe foundation. Because you're asking me about in a family, one of the things, there are many blessings that I have in my family dynamic, but one of the things that I appreciate was that emotionally I always felt safe, regardless if I was by myself, with my siblings, with my parents, with either of my parents. They created that environment where I was able to feel safe with my emotions, and not just me but my siblings as well.
Hmm.
So that's the first thing. And when I work with a lot of people, regardless of their financial background or whatever the case is, that's what a child really needs and wants. You mentioned being in a split household and having someone who was struggling with sobriety. The tough thing about it is when they're oscillating between being sober, being high, being angry, being sleepy, you don't know how to approach anything. And as a child, that is scary because guess what? These are the people who are supposed to protect you. Now, you haven't created that environment for your son, but in most situations, one of the things I say is if you have a pattern that works for you, stick to that pattern. Because at least that child can say, okay, this is who my dad is and this is how he approaches things. And mom is going to be very different than she's supposed to be because he's going to have to know who he can do what with.
Hmm.
So the most important thing in all this, I would say, is first is consistency. Second, in terms of the approach, what I would say is even before you start laying down the law, have a conversation with the child. What type of what does he do on his devices?
What does he do? All he wants
Yeah.
to do is watch other people play video games.
Yeah, I don't quite get that one, but I know a
It's
number of
incredible.
people. Yeah, it
It's
literally
incredible.
scratching my head.
Yeah, it's incredible. I don't understand. Like, you have this game, you could play this game. Yeah, I want to watch
Yes.
this guy play the game now. It's
Yep.
entertaining, whatever it is. Like, if the person, the kid or the guy is entertaining, I don't know, they like that.
Yep. So what I sometimes do, and I even do this with my niece because she's 16. Well, oh, I'm lying. She's 17 now. Yikes. So she was very into that. And honestly, Mike, what I did is, she's in Jamaica. We got on a call one day, and I literally took the time and I watched her watch the person, and I literally just absorbed. I'm not saying that every parent has the time or patience for this. I know I'm a unique breed, and I have the benefit of not being her parent. So, but what I want to do, I want to understand her worldview.
Mm-hmm.
So as I sat there and I watched her, maybe for about a half an hour, I asked questions, not necessarily a judgmental questions like, hey, what is this guy doing? What is this person doing? Why did they do that? And now I'm getting a little bit of insight into their world. Fast forward a few weeks later, I didn't bring it back up, but a few weeks later, just a particular lingo that the guy kept on using in the thing, just randomly I sprinkled it in the conversation. And what that does is that puts you in a position where you and your child, or at least me and my niece, aren't at odds with each other. There is, okay, he's not trying to control me, he's trying to understand me. And the reason I bring that up is whenever there is an issue, I'm the one that's called. Because Uncle Dino is going to be the one that can get through to my niece. Fine, it might take me 2 attempts, but I'm the one that's probably going to get her along the path, because there is the understanding of respect of, hey, this is you. I think whatever you're doing is ill-advised. This is what I suggest. And 80% of the time, ultimately, what I suggest is what is her idea. Now, again, in all respect to all the parents out there, I am not her parent. Mm-hmm. I don't have the burden of making sure that she doesn't mess up. I have the luxury of being her uncle, so I can, from afar, say, hey, do this, do that. So it's a lot tougher. It's a lot easier than I'm making it out to be in this moment. However, it is doable, because for a lot of... I'll give you a very quick example. A client that I had years ago called me, and she was crying. And I'm like, look, lady, the work that I do is good. It stays. So I don't know why you're calling me crying. But she was crying because this is a lady who struggled with substance use and sense of worth. And what we worked on a lot was building her up within herself. This didn't even have anything to do with anybody else. However, fast forward years later, she's living with her granddaughter. Her granddaughter is 6 years old. And she called me crying because about an hour earlier, she saw her granddaughter doing something. And she was like, that seems very familiar. It's a particular coping skill that myself and the client, we practice all the time. So she's like, hey, what are you doing? And the granddaughter was like, hey, this is what I see you do all the time, so I start doing it too. And her daughter happened to be there, which is the child's mom, say, yeah, mom, I do it all the time. It's really helped me and all that. And she was saying that for the past maybe 2 years, she's been bragging about her granddaughter, saying that her granddaughter is the most emotionally regulated child she knows. She doesn't throw tantrums. Yet if she's upset, she'll come to you and say, hey, grandma, I was upset because you yelled at me, or whatever the case might be. And the reason that I share that with you is, with grandma being emotionally regulated, the grandchild followed suit. The daughter also followed suit. Without her even saying, hey, do this, do that, they pick up on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I don't think we realize as adults how much the environment we grew up in affected us. I've read 2 books on this topic, and it's I'm now an expert, right? So I'm going to have an observation. It seems to me that no matter what your upbringing was, it will have a negative impact, or maybe I shouldn't say will. It very could possibly have a negative impact on you as an adult. There's these love language books and, all these kind of like self-help books, and they always dive deep into, what happened to you as a child? What was that dynamic like? How did that help teach you to communicate in the way that you communicate now that you think's normal, but your spouse doesn't think is normal? People around you don't, because they had different environments, and now they communicate differently. So it was like overly obvious. The obvious ones where this has an effect is like abusive households, physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse. Those are obvious, right? Everybody, I think, can look at those situations and go, that's going to have an impact on
Yeah.
this person 20, 30, 40 years from now. But what I kind of noticed also is that the overly loving family environment could have a negative impact as well. Maybe not one that is so obvious, but what can you tell me about why that is? Why is it is like no matter the situation or the environment, there is a likelihood that you're going to take something from that through adulthood that's going to mess you up, and you're going to have to deconstruct it and figure it out so that way you don't do the same thing to your kid. Why is it? It seems like nothing's off the table. Everything could be an effect at that point.
Well, it's the law of human nature and also the nature of life. A number of reasons that happen. So let me go to human nature. So as beings, neuroscience world, and I'm going to try to not get too deep into it, we are wired and designed to perceive threats more than we are designed to perceive moments of pleasure. And that's coming from our prehistoric brain, because there was a lot of dangers out there. So it's going to be always easier for us to see the dangers because our psyche literally wants to protect us. So it's going to be easier for us to see these things because we got to protect ourselves. So that's the first aspect. Then now the laws of nature. I'm going to do 2 laws of nature, and entertain me here, Mike. How are babies made?
Through the power of love. A man and a woman come together, sprinkle the seed and the sperm and the egg meet, and
Yes, sir. Right there, exactly.
Yeah.
It takes a sperm cell and it takes a ovary, and they meet. Another quick aspect of nature. How does electricity work? Don't overthink it. Everybody always overthinks it. The very basic part.
Factory generates electricity and wires carry it to my house.
Alrighty. So the wires. Let me stay with the wires. There's 2 types of wires. And you know this, Mike. I know you know this. There's 2 types of wires.
Do you want me to tell you the 2 types of wires?
Yeah.
There's threaded wires. Is that what you're looking for? And solid wires? I know that there's that.
Okay. What charge is in the wires? Let me be more specific.
Negative and positive.
There we go. So
Yeah.
negative and positive. And the whole point of me bringing you on this, and thank you for indulging me here. The whole point of all this is life is created out of polarizing energies. So 2 sperm cells can't create a child, neither can 2 ovaries. 2 negative charge wires won't create electricity, and 2 positive charges are going to burn the fuse. So my point here is everything in moderation. And to answer your question very directly and specifically is there will always be positives and negatives no matter how great the situation. And touching on you, and a big part of my work is we're all flawed. Nobody is perfect. However, within our flaws, we have a lot of merit, a lot of dignity, a lot of things about us that's absolutely beautiful. Your father, as tough as he, might have been, as way out there are certain qualities that are just probably absolutely phenomenal. There's a reason your mom fell in love with him at one point in time. And I won't ask you to divulge that here today, but there might be 1 or 2 things where you're like, you know what? That's actually pretty neat that my father did this thing. So, yes, you are right. No matter... Oh, and wait, let me backtrack. Us kids are ungrateful pieces of kids. We're always going to find something. And touching on your point, I said to my parents all the time, I would not have asked for a better environment to be raised in. However, we all got stuff. me and all of my siblings got stuff that we needed that they didn't provide or weren't able to provide. So we're all doing the best that we can, and our parents are also doing the same. So to touch on what you touched on, one of the things I say to parents is do the best that you can. There will always be something that your child is going to complain about. However, going back to consistency, if there is something that you can consistently plant within your child, when you are in your casket and they're giving the eulogy, they could say, hey, my dad was a goofy guy, he was always laughing around, but you know what? He was always there for me. Because you were consistently there for him. He annoyed the crap out of my mom because he couldn't take anything seriously, but he was always there for me.
Mm-hmm. Who do you work with mostly? I know you said you don't work directly with kids, but do you work with men, couples, women? What's like the major demographic there?
Major demographic are women 30 to 60 years old. And generally, women are a lot more emotionally aware than men are.
Yeah.
So they're aware of what's going on. But the thing that women, at least in my experience, have tend to gotten hung up on is not being able to fully express themselves. Because they express themselves a certain way, they might be viewed as a bitch, or a lot of women struggle with patterns of guilt and feelings of guilt. So what happens is women tend to suppress a lot of what they feel, a lot of the emotions that they have. And my work with women, by and large, at some point in time, is a pattern of balancing guilt and expressing yourself as authentically as you can, but also with respect to who you are and the people around you. My work with men typically ultimately is an emotional intelligence pursuit, to be honest. But it typically starts with emotion regulation, because one of the things I say about men, the challenge that we have is we are socialized, whether by society or family and sometimes even ourselves, to only express maybe 3 emotions. We can be angry, we can cry when our kid is born, and we're all right. It's those 3.
No, I'm all right. I like that's its own category. Man, I feel that.
And then on top of that, we only have 3. We have maybe 4 outlets. We have work. Then we have, substance, alcohol, whatever it might be. We have sports, and we have sex. That's it for men. So what happens too is women, let me not say women, men also tend to have constraints with their emotional expression just because they have a limited range and they have a limited number of outlets. They don't know where to go with it. So it's a matter of regulating that and being able to say, okay, how can you express yourself with, again, respect for yourself, standing on your values, but also respecting the people who are in your world.
Yeah. I was wondering if you've been seeing more of a trend lately with men being able to actually, grasp this ability to regulate their emotions, to identify them, and to actually work through them, and not see it as them being a pussy or some other derogatory term, because that's typically what I think men assume, is that, well, I can't be vulnerable in any way, shape, or form, especially not in front of strangers, because then I'm a bitch, I'm a pussy, I'm not a man. And that's something that I've struggled with in the past. I've done therapy. I did therapy as a child after my parents got divorced. That was more of my mother's need than my need. I was just like, I'm sure I was going through some stuff, but I
Hmm.
think it was just more of her perception of what I was feeling than what I was actually feeling that prompted me to go to childhood therapy. But
Yeah.
because I was just super quiet, my brother's 1 year older than me, my older sister's 5 years older than me. She's far enough away where she was, when I was 8, she's what, 15, 16. So she's spreading her wings, right? She's
Hmm.
learning how to fly. My brother just doesn't want me to be attached to his hip at that point. It's like, all right,
Hmm.
man, I'm the older brother. But I was always very quiet and very kind of like a lone wolf. I could stay in my room for hours, either playing video games or taking the VCR apart, never being able to put it back together quite right, or whatever, doing nothing. And I
Yeah.
think she saw that as depression and whatever. And I'm sure I was dealing with some depression and some uncertainties there. But as I gotten older, I've done therapy a few times. Some couples therapy with my wife, and also some individual therapy on my own. And I don't have a problem with. I don't think I have a problem with being vulnerable and open and expressing myself and being accountable to myself enough to know when there's something there that I need to dive deeper into, or if it's or if it's nothing. I don't know. But
Hmm.
do you see more men now being open to having these discussions than in the last 10, 20 years? How long you've been doing this as a profession, so I don't know how much you can gauge it by, but I do feel like men are like they're getting the message. Like it's okay
Yes.
for us to open up. It's okay for us to have more than the three allowed columns of emotions.
Yeah. So yes, I've been in the field for 10 years, and to touch on your question, yes, men are becoming a lot more open to the concept of vulnerability, and the sexy way to sell it is emotional intelligence. Because guys are a lot more pragmatic. Again, stereotypically, men are typically a lot more pragmatic. So intelligence is a bit more of a pragmatic form. And the conversation I have with men is, again, a lot of times a means to an end, because there's, again, that's typically how our brains tend to work. Um, so it has become a lot easier to have conversations with men, and that's a part of why I'm also creating Love Light, because I do want to create that space where we can have additional outlets. We can understand that there are a whole spectrum of emotions, and we can occupy a whole bunch of them, and sometimes at the same darn time. The other thing too, though, is the conversation about worth. Men and women struggle with feeling worthy, feeling enough. Sometimes it feels like no matter how hard we work or no matter what we do, we never feel like we're quite enough. And that some of it comes from childhood, comes from your upbringing. You always feeling, trying to get the validation of your parents. No matter how old you get, if your parents say to you that they're proud of you, you're probably gonna sob a little bit. You might hide it, but yeah, it always feels good because you always want those people to be proud of you. But again, stereotypically for men, that tends to come far and few in between. Some men tend to feel taken for granted, and also women tend to feel taken for granted. You're together for X amount of years, then it's just expected that you're going to be cooking, you're going to be clean, or you're going to be doing all the wifely things. And then if you aren't doing that, then I guess you aren't a good enough wife or a good enough mom. And women have a hard time struggling with that, especially in the modern era of trying to be a good wife, a good mom, and all them fun stuff. But you also want to be a professional. You also
Mm-hmm.
want to pursue your passions, and women tend to struggle with that. But getting back specifically to men, though, um, one of my work, one of my core passions is helping men understand and realize that expressing your emotions, yeah, it is vulnerable, but it can also be one of the most healing and freeing things that you can do, not just for yourself, but also for your family. For example, for you, having a conversation, possibly, I'm not saying that you need to do this, but having a conversation with your son openly about some of your concerns, maybe concerns that he might align to. And developmentally, because each child is different, but having conversation with your children at their level, letting them in, can also start that healing process where your son at 11 can be a little bit, or maybe at 16, or a few years from now, can be a little bit more better adjusted to life than you were at that point in time, giving him that opportunity to create, when he gets to 20, an emotionally safe environment for him and the people who are in his life.
Mm-hmm.
But back to your question, yes, men are a lot more open to the concept of, being open with their emotions and stuff like that. And one little tweak that I do want to throw out there, I don't regard myself as a therapist in the space of love light. I view myself as a consultant, and the reason for that is, I don't know if this was our prior conversation, but with the process of therapy, one, in addition to the stigma that's there, I do want to create another alternative approach to give people options. But what happens sometimes, more often than I would like, is people get, when you walk into therapy, whether you know it or not, your therapist within the first hour has to give you a diagnosis. I don't like that model. And it's not that I don't like it just because I want to be me. I feel that that is inhumane. I don't know you enough in an hour to give you a diagnosis.
Yeah, I've had 40 years of trauma. How are you going to give me a diagnosis in 40 minutes?
Yeah, I don't know enough about you. But, and we won't get too deep in the weeds about this, but this is the insurance company and all that.
Yeah.
Hey. But, for me, I'm like, again, back to the holistic approach. In our conversations, I'm talking about the whole person. Yeah, your trauma might be an important part of your upbringing. And one of the things I do is a lot of psychoeducation. So I tell people, put aside all the fancy dancy words. Trauma, at the core of it, however you want to split now, whatever type of trauma it is, ultimately, it is a emotional wound that is unhealed. As people say, they get triggered because you're touching it with, your raw hand or salt or whatever. So it's an emotionally unhealed wound. That is what a trauma is. Now, how you manage trauma is being able to get yourself in a calm mind, calm body. That's with the coping skills and the regulation. That's with your support system. But also, if there's a specific trauma, how you relate to that trauma. If you are able to reframe your relationship to that particular person, thing, or occurrence, that trauma, in time, its importance in your life can start to dissipate. Meaning, if you build your level of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Your worth and what you got going for you up to a certain level, and your trauma is down here, is literally not worth your time, effort, or energy re-engaging in it. And your worth and who you are will be sustained by your coping skills, your support system, and also you finding value within yourself.
How do we move past stuff that we don't even know about that's affecting us?
Well, you start with what you have. So you start with the things that you realize that it's affecting you. So if, let's say, you don't know what it is, let me see. I had an example. So my mom, she grew up in a time in Jamaica where she remembered when Jamaica was finally getting its independence from Britain. And what that does for a person, let alone a girl in Jamaica, is that says that you have to be dependent on somebody else. She grew up in that era. You aren't enough to take care of your own stuff. And the reason I bring that up is my mom, she grew up in an environment that she had to survive. And even to this day, when she is still safe, she's still in survival mode. What the reason I bring that up is for us as her children, sometimes we're operating off of what the environment that she created. And last year, or maybe a year and a half, my sister and I were having a conversation with her. We were like, hey, we didn't even realize that we were this petrified of the world, but it's coming from you. Now, my mom, of course, as I said, she views the world as a threat. So she's like, why are you attacking me? We're like, Mom, we aren't attacking you. We're just acknowledging what we're experiencing. And getting back to your question is, how you do it is start with what you have. If you feel something, your emotions, your energy within you, that is true. That's honestly your true north. So if you feel uneasy about something, stay there. Process that. And in time, as you listen, it will start to unfold and reveal itself. And that's when you start to get closer to what's going on. And then you can start the process of emotional healing. But it starts with listening. And again, going back to the conversation with children, it starts with listening.
I feel like a lot of people have this sense that they do this a lot better than they actually do. And just from my own experience, just listening to, call it what you want, we'll quote, gut feeling, or, I'll tell you a story. My older brother, Brian, dealt with 13 years of hardcore drug addiction, went through everything, finally found his way to Christ. Through Christ, was able to rebuild his life, find purpose, and to hear the message that was always right there in front of him. I went through a somewhat similar journey, hitting rock bottom, or what I felt was rock bottom at the time, finding my way to Christ, this was somewhat recent. This is only within the last few years for me. And then being able to finally hear the message that was always there in front of me. But I was never my radio wasn't tuned to the right frequency to receive the message that was being relayed out there. But it reminds me of when my brother would tell me these stories about, I heard God telling me to go and talk to that person. I heard God tell me no, don't go left, go over this way. And then it turned into an opportunity where he met somebody or was in an opportunity position that he wouldn't have been in if he didn't go that way and listen to gut feeling, the voice of God, the whatever it is that somebody might want to label it. I do feel like it's somewhat the same thing where it's like, like you said, your true north. This is the thing that is guiding you. This deep feeling inside you that you could sense, even if you can't hear the words clearly in plain English, you know what it feels like, and you could feel something tugging, right? Yes. Tugging on your heart a little bit. Go this way, go that way. Talk to this person. What is it about this person? Engage with them a little bit, and then you find out this is the person that you've been waiting for, for your whole life. What is it about somebody not being able to identify that? I'm trying to think of the right way to ask this. For me, before I found Christ and I was actually in a position to hear the message, I knew of the message. I had plenty of friends who would speak the message, but I couldn't hear it. I could hear sounds, but I couldn't feel the meaning of it.
There you go.
What is that, or how important is that for somebody's growth? I'm not even saying it has to specifically be Christ, right? Because I know not everybody is on this path, but of finding their true north, of following their gut to identify a message that's being given to them, and actually identify it and then take hold of it and act upon it. How important is that for somebody's ability to, I don't know, achieve greatness, be who they were intended to be, whatever, fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm. That is the core piece right there. And I spoke to you about, or I hope I said it, about helping people find purpose and being able to enjoy their lives. That is what that is all literally all based off. Giving you a little bit of back way insight into all of this is, at the end of the day, as sophisticated as we think we are, all of us are made up of, again, two things in balance: matter and energy. Now, that energy that I talk about is what we all then now call spirit. And then different denominations, different religious beliefs have a different view of the spirit. Some people call it Christian, some people call it Allah, some people call it Confucius. Whatever it is, ultimately, it's still the same energy of love and faith that is flowing within all of us. And it occupies us because when that energy leaves us, we say that we're dead, because now it's just the matter that's left. Now, while someone still has the energy within them, where people tend to feel lost is as they get disconnected with that energy and that feeling within inside of them. But what I will say, and what I have said to a lot of my clients, or even times when I do consults with people, is please be kind to yourself. Because we live in a society and a system that is literally designed to pull us away from ourselves. Now, in the past, it was one thing or another. Sometimes it's drugs. But in this modern era of things, going back to your conversation with your son, it is all the devices. Mm-hmm. You spend so much time on the devices, you neglect who you are. You forget who you are. And then that's all you're about. Hey, I'm spend however long on TikTok trying to compare myself to a 30-second clip of somebody's life. And even outside of that, someone sees you walking down the street and gets distracted by how you might be attired, not knowing the energy that's within you. And why I'm saying that all that is important is, everybody on this earth wants to live a life filled with meaning. And how you connect with that meaning is by getting in tune to the feeling that's within you. And sometimes you might have to hit rock bottom, because now you're in the void and now it has to be quiet so that you can hear, so that you can be still. For some people, it's a matter of creating that sense of purpose. Hey, why am I here? What is it that is going to outlive me once the energy leaves my body? But because of all the noise of life, it is hard for many of us to figure that out. So we struggle and we try to survive.
Is this how you approach your consultations with this thing in mind, right? I'm assuming well, maybe I shouldn't assume, but as somebody who practices, therapy and healing, and also being a Christian, I imagine it's probably hard to separate your Christian values with your relationship with your client, right? And even though they might not be Christian, and even though it might not even be a part of the conversation, because I'm sure that becomes a kind of just a professional tightrope that you have to walk constantly. But trying to illustrate to people who aren't of the same faith as you, maybe the same message of energy, of finding your energy, connecting with it, and having a purpose for that energy is a big part of it. is this kind of like the approach that you have? Is this always what's in the back of your mind when you're speaking to somebody new and you're starting to learn about all the crazy stuff that they went through when they were a kid and the dynamics of the family and the dynamics of their new family and all the problems that they say they're bringing to the table? Are you constantly just always in the back of your mind thinking like, okay, this person has lost the connection to the energy. They don't even know what the energy is. Maybe how do I connect them? How do I connect them with who they are today, with who they've always been? Right, this energy that's deep inside them.
Yeah. Again, Mike. You asked all these great questions. We might need
I'm
to
just super
re-record this.
interested, and just like to clarify, like so. This is why I was kind of a hard ass about not having any discussions before meeting you here today. A lot of the people that I meet with on this podcast are first time discussions. You reached out and I don't fault you for it because you're not the first person. You're not going to be the last person. Hey, do you want to like talk a little bit, get to know each other? It's like, no. When I saw your thing come through, I looked at enough to know, I think there's something interesting here. Also, that energy, that little voice in me said, hey, I think you need to speak to this guy. Like, I don't know what it is about it. We never spoke on the phone. I read a couple of things that you put in the form. I looked at some of your stuff. I looked at your website, and I was like, yeah, there's something here. So I set it up this way so that way I am organically gravitating towards people who I'm meant to have conversations with. If that makes any sense at all to anybody, it's something that I'm figuring out as I say it. I think that's why I wanted to start doing this, right? Part of it is, or was, a part of the thought process was, well, if I have a podcast, I used to have one, I go on them here and there, but if I have my own podcast, I'll have more conversations, and maybe through more conversations, I'll get more business. And so there was like this backdoor to business thing that was like a part of the original concept.
Yeah.
And then haven't had a ton of episodes here, but each one that I have, I'm starting to recognize a pull. This is something that I have come to realize in my coming to Christ journey as well. There's a tugging. There's a slight tugging on the heart, and there's you have to learn to have the ability to recognize the tugging and then follow it. Right?
Yes.
A lot of people fight it. They could recognize the tugging and then they fight it. I know better. I don't want to go through that. That's uncomfortable, this and that. But even through something that will definitely be uncomfortable for me, like having a first-time conversation with somebody I've never met on a recording and then put this out there publicly, this could have been a disaster. You know what I'm saying? It's terrifying for me to go, I don't know if I'm going to say something stupid because I have a stupid sense of humor, and then this person isn't going to get it because they come from a different walk of life than me, or like whatever it is. But there was something there that tugged me towards having the conversation with you. So with that being said, in your approach to what you're doing, because I know you said with what you're doing, you kind of are, it's not like your traditional therapy box that everybody thinks therapy fits in. This is something different, right? So I'm wondering, through our conversation where we got to at an hour in here, talking about the energy within somebody, is this the thing that gives you purpose? Is this pursuit of connecting people with their energy? Or am I completely off?
No, you're 100% on point, because I believe, as I said to you a little bit earlier, we are so much more than the labels and the constructs that society places on us, and sometimes that we put on ourselves. Because we are not just matter, we are energy. Now, when I meet with someone, honestly, my approach is so there's a form that people fill out, and that's just to give me context. And I always say to people, most times people are good about it. I think I only have one person give me a little bit of pushback. And I said to them, this is just a fragment of information. The consult is for me to understand who you are. And the reason I bring all this up is my approach and my energy is always from a place of acceptance. Someone asked me one time, they're like, oh, other therapists say, hey, it's not a space of judgment. I'm like, I don't need to say that. I accept you. That is my general thing. It's from a space of acceptance and, as you mentioned, curiosity. So as we speak about this, again, as I said, if I'm good at nothing else, I'm a good observer. I'm a good problem solver. So as I sit with someone and I listen, and I understand where they are and how they view life and how the life has gone for them, it gives me an opportunity to ask, again, thought-provoking questions as to where they're at, where they want to be. And then on the flip side, a number of the coping skills that I practice with my clients literally all the time is a breathing exercise. Because with the breathing, you get to be still. You get to quiet a whole bunch of things out, because that gives you a greater opportunity to not necessarily, as you were saying a little bit earlier, hear the words. More importantly, you feel it. You feel the energy reverberate through you. And a part of my process is helping that person, guiding them step by step through, for example, hearing it but thinking that they know better or believing that they know better. And that's fine. Again, my entire approach is about maintaining that level of dignity. I'm not going to take away someone's dignity. That's not my place. That's between them. And also, one of the things, if I ever have this conversation with people, is that's between you and the God that's within you. Because a part of my spiritual belief is that God, from my perspective, is energy. And we all have energy within us. Now, how we relate to that energy, that's our personal business. But yeah, when I sit with someone on a consult, my thought process is I invest heavily in understanding. I don't care too much to be right. I actually get a lot more excited when I'm wrong, because it'd be like, oh, I don't know something. I got to figure this out. I got to learn about it. But more often than not, my true investment is in understanding. And as myself and my client goes through that process of self-discovery, I'm like, hey, did you notice this thing? They're like, yeah, I noticed that too. You saw it? I'm like, yeah. But again, we're meeting each other on that space of like an energetic connection where, no, I don't need to live their life to understand the pain that they have felt, because I've felt pain as well. I've been abandoned. I've not necessarily gone through certain levels of abuse, but I can empathize. Again, tapping into the energy. The story in and of itself, for me, is more important for the client. The story is not important for me. What's important for me is getting to the point of pain, figuring out what needs to be expressed, and helping them heal through the expression that is at the core of that pain. And a little bit earlier, you and I were talking about, no matter how great the family dynamic is, again, on the energetic level, I believe that in every positive there's a negative, and in every negative there's a positive. I don't need to judge either. It's to be able to get to a space of finding that balance. And that's where healing is. Very last thing I'll say, I do have one other thing I want to touch on for you though. When people talk about health, again, I try to keep things simple. What is health? Health is simply an optimal state of balance. That's all it is. Forget all the fancy dancy words, metabolism and all the other stuff. It doesn't matter. It's a state of balance. And in that state of balance, you get to connect with your energy. You get to feel. You get to understand who you are. And there might be certain things that was important to you at 20 that no longer serves you. So you got to let that go to make room for who you are at 40 and the life that you want to create for when you're 50.
That makes sense. How much in your consulting, I was going to say consultation, and then I changed my mind. How much in your consulting do you bring in other aspects of other aspects of improvement that somebody could put in their life, right? So if they're coming to you and they're speaking, they're obviously willing at least to have try to tackle their mental health, right?
Yes.
What is affecting them currently from past, and how to benefit from this, here on to into the future. Do you ever have discussions with people about physical health or nutritional health, spiritual health in your consultations, and what role do those things play in somebody having a good balanced state of mental health?
Absolutely. Yes. Now, all the time, because again, that's why my approach is holistic. It includes all of that. Because and I've because of my approach, my services are not covered by insurance. So I've referred a whole bunch of people out. I'm like, hey, I would love for you to work with me, but financially, this would be more of a burden for you. So no, it sucks for me, and maybe for you, because a lot of times, people are like, hey, you actually talk to me like a real person. You actually give feedback, so I really want to work with you. But I'm like, it financially would be more of a disservice in given your situation. And all other aspects of a person's life definitely impacts them. But let's say I have a client, I have clients who are able to and are willing to move forward. Every aspect, every dimension of you impacts you and your work. The reason why emotion is so important for me is, again, it's a very simplified version. Emotion is nothing more than energy, getting back to that word that I love, in motion. So when someone is anxious, it's just chaotic energy. Trauma is just chaotic energy on steroids. When someone is depressed, is the energy is pretty down here, and all the other diagnoses, it's just a frequency of the energies and how they're vibrating, how they're moving through your body. That's what all these labels are, essentially. Now, the reason that I bring this up is with regulating your emotion, that is your foundation. Because the more balanced your emotion, the more worthy you are, where you're going to say, hey, you know what? It's important for me to eat healthily. It's important that I get enough sleep so that I can be productive the next day. So now all these things aren't now necessarily tasks and obligations that you have to do. There's something that you want to do because it feeds and sustains you and the life that you want to create. And I definitely have those direct conversations with my clients, because if, let's say, someone isn't getting enough sleep, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? You gotta sleep.
Yeah.
If their diet is off, it's like, hey, everything is relative, everything is connected. So you gotta be on top of your diet. Staying consistent with exercise is another conversation at times. And what I say to people at that point is anger. Let me use this as a quick example. People always get very surprised when I say this. I'm like, if you're angry, yes, there's a certain degree of talking about it that makes you feel all good. But anger as a specific emotion has a certain element of physicality to it. You can't just talk it out all the time. Sometimes you gotta go run. It has to be physically exerted at a certain point in time. So, way back when I had this one client where I strongly encouraged them to stop working with me, because the fundamentals of the anger that we were working on, we already addressed that. And I suggested that they join a boxing club. Get it out there. You already know, and it happened to be a male, we already did all the psychoeducation stuff. So you know where it's coming from. You know all this type of stuff. And emotionally, you're a lot more intelligent and responsible with your anger. But you also do need that outlet. So we've done our work. I wish you the best. Go find yourself a boxing gym. Because that was what that person needed. So everything is important, and yes, in my how I approach it, my intention is to be here for the benefit of God's children. And again, it doesn't matter your denomination or whatnot. As I said, for me, my philosophical belief is God at the end of the day is energy that flows through us. So I'm here for God's children to help those different energies heal and be whole, because that's what we all want at the end of the day.
You said something earlier, way earlier. You said that from your experience, men view therapy as like a means to an end. You know,
Times,
like
yeah.
something's going on. My wife. I thought you were going to say it usually starts with their wife dragging them to couples therapy, and then you wind up having some one-on-one sessions with them because everybody realizes there's more underneath the surface. It had me thinking: is it harder to keep men as clients because we'll feel like, oh, we had the eureka moment, we had the breakthrough, we're good, we got it from here, buddy. Deano, great talking to you. Don't need you anymore. Whereas maybe in contrast, women are more willing to stay on the pursuit. Maybe just because they never feel like they ever find the eureka moment, and maybe there's two problems there, just two opposing issues, It's like women, and I'm a generalizer and I know nothing. So I'm speaking from my rear here, but like, for me personally, like I saw when I went through therapy, it was like, oh, hey, we got the answer we needed. That's it. I'm done. I don't need to keep paying this lady $80 a week if we're good to go. Oh, you want to keep seeing her? You should keep seeing her. Like, this is a conversation my wife and I are having. And then, but then also maybe women don't allow themselves to ever hit the breakthrough. Like they're always just constantly on the pursuit. So do you think women tend to stay longer term clients than men for that reason?
I've never thought of it that way, but I do see that being a possibility. Now, how I've designed my particular flavor of work is, our work has a natural end. So the first aspect of my work is what I call the care package, and that's just simply to help you cope. Because again, some of us just simply need to cope. That's the very first step. So that has a natural end for both men and women, and it's a short one. So men don't get too antsy, because it's 6 sessions long. They're like, fine, I can do 6 sessions.
Yeah.
But even with my bigger package, that has a natural end date, so everybody still counts down. Now, some women re-up. And the reason that I have the natural end date, that's the reason I brought this up, was, for me, this is my personal belief. You might meet other people, but again, my personal belief is, I don't think, first of all, again, as I said, we're all flawed. So even when you meet someone, we're all on this process of self-discovery. So nobody's perfect. I got my own crap that I'm working through half of the time. And I'm very open with my clients. I'm like, if you get nothing else from me, you're gonna get authenticity. I don't know if you need something else, go to somebody else. I'm gonna be real with you.
For me, that's kind of everything. It's like, man, if I feel like you're just authentically being honest and transparent, it's like I could be who I am,
Yes,
because I could match that energy. Yeah, that's important.
Because one of the things I say to my clients, I'm like, if I anticipate and if I'm asking you to bare your soul with me and you to be honest with me, because that's the only way this process works, this is a relationship, Mike. This is an exchange of energy. So if I anticipate that of you or any of my clients, for me personally, my dignified belief is that my client, I owe them that.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't have to be unprofessional about it, but I'm going to be a person. I'm going to be who I am.
The natural end date thing, that's very interesting to me. I find that to be very progressive in your field, because it seems to be mental therapy and chiropractors are colluding together to never let you go and to always have you there, right? So there's never an end date, is my point.
There's never an end date.
My point is, we'll see you next week, right? See you next Friday, right? See you next Friday. And then you never seem like you ever, you have to pretend like somebody in the family passed away and you can't make a session, and then that gives you enough reprieve to go, listen, I'm not coming back after all. But So that's cool. So you were explaining why the natural end date exists in your
Yes.
program. So yeah, continue on that because I think that's
So,
very interesting.
yeah, so I have a natural end date because my again approach is that we're all figuring this thing called life out. My role is to help you with this specific space and phase in your life, help you balance and regulate the energies. And then, me personally, I want to see you fly. So go
Mm.
try life without me. Go do life. And all the things, and one of the things I said to all my clients, this is why we practice every single time. I'm like, practice makes permanent. So by the time you leave with me, a lot of the things that we practice is going to be ingrained in a part of who you are, which is why I can brag and say, hey, look, once a client leaves it sticks, like, because we
Yeah.
practice this time and time again, and sometimes they know exactly what I'm going to say, and I'm like, good, because you don't need me as a part of your life forever. Now, if let's say something else happened, or and this is what tends to happen, is by the time we get to the end date, we've resolved the lifelong thing, and now, oh, by the way, I got this other thing, and I'm like, first of
Reset
all,
the
go,
clock.
yeah, I'm like, go try life. Like, I like you and all, but go try life,
Yeah.
and then we can come back to that, because we all need to breathe. One of the things I said to my clients, and one of the things I factor into all of my work is, you were asking about, different aspects of life. A very big conversation my clients and I have are their interests, their hobbies. What do you like? A lot of people have a hard time answering that, but the reason I do that is a lot of what I do is a learning and a healing process. And I've been doing this long enough to realize, and you can attest if you feel comfortable or not, it's freaking exhausting learning and healing all the darn time. Every week I gotta go. No, that's
Hmm.
exhausting. So one of the things that I also include a lot is play. If, indulge me here a little bit, Mike. Say your ABCs out loud.
A B C D E F G H I J K L M N
All
O
right,
P Q.
all right.
That's where I
Oh,
started getting. That's where it starts getting fun for me. Right around LMNOP.
I appreciate and I love that because a little bit you tapped into the traditional song, but then you started freestyling. And the reason I do that with probably almost everybody is one of the ways we learn best, apart from painful experiences, is through play.
Hmm.
You gotta make it fun. You gotta break it up at times. And a traditional therapist, at times, and I get it, they want to just go deep every single time, every 5 seconds. And that's cool. But sometimes a person has to be able to understand what the energy of joy feels like. Because how are you going to go to that energy of joy willingly if that's a stranger to you? How are
Yeah.
you going to enjoy your life if you don't know what it's like to enjoy life? One of the things when I work with people who experience substance use, I'm like, are you sure you want to go down this journey with me? Because I'm going to get you results, but here's what's going to happen shortly after that. Sober life is boring as heck.
Oh yeah.
So if you aren't ready for that, I'm not the person for you to talk to, because being sober can be boring, especially if you've lived that life. But the reason I bring that up is then we now have to have a very active conversation as to how we can start to insert moments and aspects of excitement in your life that is sustainable, that is healthy, because the substances that you were using, it became untenable at a certain point in time. But I
Do
don't
you
want
have
to
to
get
be
too far.
careful? Do you have to be careful though that they don't replace that addiction with just another addiction, right? Because I see that tends to happen as well with addicts. They get sober. A sober life is boring. It's the worst. And then you find something else. So whether it's working out or it's God or it's whatever, and you become an addict for this thing. And listen, I don't care what you're addicted to. Eventually, it gets super annoying for the people around you. And so you could push away somebody just as easily with heroin as you can with Bible thumping
Yep.
because it just gets overwhelming. They don't want to
Yep.
hear it. I don't want nothing to do with it. So it's like, do you have to have a very balanced conversation about balancing? Hey, whatever this new thing or set of things you're going to start doing now instead of heroin or whatever you were addicted to, like that also has to be like you have to be careful with that as well because you just wind up
Yes.
becoming addicted to something else.
1,000%, a thousand
Yeah.
percent. Because again, how you're so again, not to get too deep into the neuroscience of it, but a part of your brain, half of your brain is divided into two hemispheres, left side, right side. But one half of your brain is structured around logic, and the reason I bring that up is it needs something to fill a gap.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I say to people who, yeah, let me answer your question first before I go off on my tangent. One of the things I say to people who are struggling or who have struggled is yes, we do have to have very active conversations about what is going to fill that gap, what is going to fill that role once we get to a point of healing certain things. There has to be a filler for it because you're probably going to relapse, or as you said, you're going to substitute it for something else. And even if you're substitute for something else, that's not necessarily too bad. It's just a matter of figuring out how to balance it all so that you aren't overwhelming yourself or life in general. Very, very quickly though, I want to touch on this for substance use. I can't do everything all at once, but eventually a part of my advocacy with substance use is helping people understand that substance use ultimately is a coping skill. And it's a coping skill because it has occupied this point in this person's life because many people who find themselves in a life of substance use, they're living in emotional turmoil, and that substance is to cover that emotional pain. I'm not justifying it. My intention is to help society get to a point of meeting individuals who are struggling with a sense of empathy. We're all going through shit. And just because my coping skill happens to be within the realm of being okay, that doesn't make it okay for me to be judgmental on another person for whatever their substance of choice might be. These people are going through something. So that was important for me to say. I don't think I had another point other than that.
Okay. The point is well taken. I feel like dealing with my brother's addiction, he was good for many, many years. And then somewhat recently he relapsed and he went on a tear, this guy.
Mm.
And I felt extremely resentful towards him when that happened. How could you throw all this away? He's about to have another kid. Like, you name it, it was there to hold this grudge against him for it. I started separating myself from him a little bit. And through I don't know. All right. So I guess I'll just be open about it. So through ayahuasca and having a plant ceremony, the one thing that I dealt with in that ceremony was my relationship with my brother. And the thing that I walked away from that experience that weekend was the fact that my brother's addiction, first of all, it's not who he is. It does not define who he is as a person. He was a great person before and a great person after, even a great person through. He was just completely misguided. These are the demons that follow him around. They're constantly on his shoulder, and it's something that he needs to fight fire with, right? He stopped doing that, and he relapsed. My awareness in my relationship with him and the way I was being resentful and separating myself away from him, I was able to realize that that was never going to help him. And out of all the people in my family unit, that him and I being so close, only a year apart and being brothers and going through a bunch of stuff together, similarly, that I was probably one of the only people that could help him but I can't do it from this place of resentment and not being open with him. So I called him up that Sunday or whatever, and I told him what had happened. Said, "Hey, here's how I came to this conclusion." I mean, he was already aware, but and here's what I'm feeling, and I'm gonna ask that you don't say anything for like 10 minutes. Let me get this all out, and then process it, however, and then you could say whatever you want back. But I just need to let you know how I feel. And basically, what I told him was that I recognize that me having resentment towards him was never going to help him heal his addiction demon, right? It was never going to help. And that I come to the conclusion that I need to be there more, and I need to put my judgments aside in order to be able to help him. So the reason why I'm bringing that up and telling this story is, you said that we're all dealing with something, right? And I think it's easy for people who have a loved one or somebody they know who deals with drug addiction or alcohol addiction, specifically those, to immediately get resentful and separate from them. And I want to be like balanced about it. Drug addicted people do a lot of effed up stuff to their people that love them the most. And after a while, you can't deal with it anymore. So it's almost healthier for the person who's watching it happen to separate themselves and just let this person kind of float out there and find their way back. And that's a very nice way of putting it. But that's kind of what happens, right?
Yeah.
And then when you're in that place as the person who has a drug addicted loved one, and now you have found yourself separated from them because of the things they've done to you and the resentment that's built up, it is very, very difficult to build a bridge back there.
Yes.
What I want to know, or maybe the point of this even coming up, is how can we help people who are dealing with this situation? They have a loved one addicted to drugs. It's destroyed their family. It's destroyed their relationship. The drug addicted person is finding their way back, right? Either through religion or whatever, therapy or whatever it might be, through jail, through a prison sentence, whatever it might be. That's kind of helped them correct their course. Now they're trying to find their way back to those people who they love and who had loved them so much at one point. How do we help these people? It was me. So it was me dealing with my brother who was astray and finding enough courage in myself to say, okay, there's like a little bit of trust I have to have here. Luckily, I had faith in God, so that really helped us build our bridge back together. But how can we help people heal those relationships when they're the person who is, the loved one who's just kind of watching it happen?
Yeah.
Like, how do we bring them back together? I don't know. That was a very long way of... I don't know if any of that made sense, but...
Made absolute sense. I'm right there with you. So when I work with people who have a loved one who is struggling, a number of things I say to them off the rip, because as I said, I'm very transparent before I get even to the healing part. The first part is, this is not about you. It's not about you. It's their journey on their life journey. So it's not about you. The second thing is, you can't save them. If they do not want to be saved, no matter how much love, no matter how much whatever, if they do not want to heal or whatever the process is, it's an internal journey. They have to be on that journey. You can't want it for them. No doctor can want it for them. It has to be their process. Those are the very two aspects of hard truth that it's important that I share with loved ones, because sometimes people take it very personally, and then sometimes people want to do it for them, and it's like, no, even if you do it for them, it's gonna last maybe a week. Then now the actual healing it's a grieving process. And the reason I say it's a grieving process is there's something that we call living grief, meaning the person is still alive, but the version of the person, you have to grieve and give yourself some degree of closure. Because if you don't, you are going to hold them and yourself to unfair and unrealistic expectation. So you're setting them up for failure, and quite frankly yourself. So what would be important is having some degree of a grieving process of, hey, who this person once was to you or how you once saw them, and accepting them as they are in this moment. Another thing that might be helpful is having a support system. So it's not just you that's fighting this battle. Your support system chips in and reinforces you, because quite frankly, and you probably might be able to attest to this, it's exhausting trying to support someone, even just, I wonder if they're alive. That's an exhausting thought. Or I don't know where they're at right now, or do they have money? I don't know where your brother lives, but sometimes in Pennsylvania it gets really cold. How is he scoring? Sometimes when I work with people with substances, I get very concerned, because at a certain point in time, money runs thin, and the thinner your money, the crappier the drug, and because you're lacing it with everything. And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And then they're more willing to do crazy shit to get it, which is the first episode of this podcast was with my brother, Brian. He was my first guest, and we talked a lot about some stuff that happened in his journey, and I asked him straight out, I said, what is it about being in that mindset that you just did not give a shit about any of us? Your son that was just born, your girlfriend who was now raising this kid alone, essentially, your brothers and sisters, your parents. Like, what is it? And he's just like, dude, I just didn't care. None of that, as much as I loved you guys and everybody, none of that was as important to me as just getting high. He's like, and that was my sole focus, and I did everything in my day to make that happen. And then get to the end of that day and say, tomorrow I'm going to be different. And then wake up and just do the same thing all over again. A lot of times just getting progressively worse day after day, right?
Yeah. Because again, that level of worth, and again, and I could be wrong, you could have this private conversation with your brother. His internal sense of worth was lower than the substances. So then everybody else, it didn't matter as much. And going back to where you and I were talking a little bit earlier, very big part of my work with my clients is building up your sense of worth. Because the more valuable and more worthy you see yourself, things that are down here aren't even going to be worth your time, energy, effort, nor anything to even mess around with that. But if the roles are reversed, where your worth is down here, and as you progressively use a substance, it makes you feel good, it takes the pain away, you don't have to worry about it, you get that escape, now you're just, it's pleasure, 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 pleasure. So even the people who he would say he cared about are no longer as important, because now this is up here. So to flip that script, you literally have to flip where now the things you got going for you, your worth is higher, where it's not literally not worth your time.
Yeah. I think he said that exact thing that you just explained. I'm pretty sure that's what he had explained as what he was feeling. And also this sense of like, well, everybody thinks I'm a piece of shit. Everybody thinks I'm a dirtbag. So might as well just be what everybody thinks I am. It's that self-worth, and then the perception of your worth to everybody else was just so low in his case that, yeah, some of the stuff he was doing is incredible. That he made it out the other side to even tell about it, because it is really something. We've been going on almost 2 hours now, man. I love talking to you. I think anybody who watches this, and anybody who's brave enough to watch 2 hours worth of our conversation could find some value in it, and that's super important to me. And I will put this information in whatever I post or whatever, but where can people find you, get connected with you if they feel like they want to explore having a consultation with you? What's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is through my website, www.lovelightservices.com, and I am dabbling in social media. I'm on Instagram. Okay. So Love Light Services, that's my handle.
The way you said that, I have zero confidence in your confidence that you're going to pull it up. You're like, I'm dabbling in what the kids call the social media now. All right, we're showing our age here, man. No,
My wife
that's
is gonna laugh at me when she sees it. She's gonna be like, "Grandpa, why you gotta show you how old you are?"
Hey, I have confidence that you will figure out the social medias, and I feel like it's just a really great way to connect, with potential clientele, right? Pretty
Hmm.
much in most businesses, but in what you're doing and what your purpose is, I feel like there is a great need for people to find connection with their inner energy and their spirit and to deal with trauma and all these other things, but to really become okay with who they are and figure out how to connect with that, and then decipher through social media, right? The tool that we use to try to connect with people. There's so much noise and clutter and so many things that can have a negative effect on somebody. So I think injecting more of what you have going on is the right way forward. It's social media is not going
Appreciate that.
away. Algorithms aren't going away. If
Yeah.
we could just inject more positivity, more healing, and more connection into the algorithm, it will reach more people who need it. That's my crazy thought, anyway.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Real quick before we go though, just getting back to your son and something that you said about you. You have the absolute golden ticket for your son. I don't think you realize it. You said that you're a curious person.
Hmm.
Lean into your strength of curiosity. Be curious about his life. Ask a whole bunch of questions where it's like, damn, this guy's really trying. He's really thinking. And again, that's going to give you the power of buy-in. So when you say something, the more he feels like you actually are trying to connect, you're genuinely curious. And as I said, with sitting talking to you, you ask some very good questions. You're naturally going to, one, ask genuinely good questions for him, but also you will genuinely start to learn and understand things from his perspective. And once you understand that, it's way more likely for you to have an impact in shaping whatever it is and find that balance of being his parent without necessarily being his friend or whatever.
Hmm.
That right there is your golden ticket, my dear friend.
I love that, man. Thank you for saying that. I feel like my son has been the greatest blessing in my life. Other than coming to Christ, it has been the only thing that has given me purpose.
Mm.
For a long time, I operated without any kind of purpose, very low to moderate self worth. Hit it pretty well for a very long time. When I became a business owner and I left punching a clock, the real world slapped me in the face and said, "Hey, you were just kind of operating within like a repetitious, like a repeatable cycle."
Mm-hmm.
And it gave you this false sense of your abilities. So now that I have to operate my business and show up, and this year has been challenging for me. Last year wasn't as challenging as this year is, but I'm learning to recognize it for what it is, which is an ability to learn a little bit more about myself and what I'm capable of, and I know everything's going to be fine. But when my son was born, that started my purpose, my journey of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That when you become a father or become a mother, I mean, I don't understand how people don't feel a change instantly the first time they lay eyes on their first kid.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I saw my son and I held him, everything in my life changed. Not everything changed 180 immediately, but I knew that something deep down inside of me had changed that day. And here I stand before you as a curious man and somebody who's just constantly trying to find a way to connect with the people that I love on a better level. That's like my
Yeah.
main goal right now. Everything else will happen. You know,
Yep.
the bills
Yep.
are going to get paid. I'll figure this out. Like all of those things are going to happen. But if all of that fell apart and I still had my connections with my family, my son and my wife and my siblings, my parents, I'd still be as rich as I am today.
Mm-hmm.
If I had none
Mm-hmm.
of that and I had all the money in the world, I'd be as empty as anything. So it's like I've learned to place value where it's more beneficial for
Yes,
everybody,
sir.
right? So,
Yes, sir. Keep
so I
being
appreciate
curious,
that.
my
Thank
friend.
you.
Keep being curious.
Stay curious, brother. I love it. That's gonna be my new motto.